They got our guy another Grammy nomination.
Yeah, they
Burna
did.
Boy.
Yeah.
It was expected.
Yeah, basically. When we did the review for Burna Boy's Twice As Tall on Facts Only, after the album dropped, I think we ended up with a conversation about, we asked the question if he was going to get a Grammy nomination, and it seemed inevitable at the time. You have to look at what Twice As Tall represents to the Nigerian mainstream. You have to look at what the sound was. It was a calculated Grammy move from the start. That was what that album was. From the aesthetics to the sound, to the branding, to the marketing, to the features, and to even Diddy, who was an executive producer on the album. Diddy is basically the ultimate American marketer, the ultimate marketer in American pop culture. And you have to look at how they basically made Diddy a focal point of that album. Even though everybody knew that Diddy didn't exactly do anything special for that album, at least during the primary creative process of that album. But it makes sense from an optics perspective to put Diddy at the forefront of the conversations around that album. And then you look at the Mike Dean guitar solo at the end of Way Too Big. You look at how it featured Salty Soul. You look at how it featured Stormzy, a British rapper, an award-winning British rapper, was on Burna Boy's hook. You look at this last song on the album, and you look at how the song shares similarities with popular outros like Hand of God by John Bellion or Chance the Rapper's Blessings from the Grammy-winning coloring book. Look at some of those conversations, and it was basically inevitable that Burna Boy was going to get a Grammy nomination. And look at it this way. The journey to Twice As Tall started about 3 years ago, or 2 years ago. No, 3 years ago. Because Outside was the first album he released under Bad Habits and Atlantic Records, right? But Outside was never going to be in that conversation. It was basically like, it was the first step in a long game. But African Giant got a Grammy nomination and he didn't win, sadly. Nobody was surprised that Angelique Kidjo won. But after Angelique Kidjo won the Grammy in January 2020, or in the earlier parts of 2020, in Q1 2020, we had a conversation about how Burna Boy was going to be back here. And here he is.
What's the background of Twice As Tall and its link to the Grammy?
Well, like I said the other time, you have to look at how the background of the album. Burna Boy lost the Grammy for African Giant. He lost it to Angelique Kidjo. He didn't post a picture for a long time. For about a week, for a few days, he wasn't even on social media at all. He performed at the Grammy party, and then all of a sudden, he disappeared. Nobody knew where it was. We couldn't even find a picture of Burna Boy anywhere online. Nobody knew what it was. And then, all of a sudden, he comes back to social media and went on a rant and says, no, he posted a picture after, a couple of pictures. And then there was a picture with him and Angelique Kidjo and his mom at a bowling alley. And then after, he went on the rant on social media and said a lot of these things, and a lot of people were against him. He seemed to point fingers at some of his colleagues without exactly mentioning names, and a lot of other things like that. And in that moment, he said he thanked Angelique Kidjo, who, as a matter of fact, gave him a shout out when she won a Grammy Award for Celia, right? And he says, oh, here I am. I learned something from this stage. I learned a lot from Angelique Kidjo, and now I'm Twice As Tall, and that's the title of my upcoming album. Now, on the opening track to Twice As Tall, he says, "Oh, I remember that I couldn't level up, and the Grammy had the nigga feeling sick as fuck." We even said something about throwing up. Now look at it this way: this entire album is Burna Boy's idea of, okay, you didn't give me the first time, I'm not going to give up, I'm going to go again. He said Angelique Kidjo gave me a lot of lessons. Some of those lessons are definitely appearing on this album. Now look at it this way. The weight of American music capitalism is with Burna Boy, right? In his generation, he is the third one who is enjoying this idea of a crossover artist from Nigeria, the first one from his generation. Now, people are going to say D'banj and a little bit with Ice Prince, even though he never signed to a major label, a foreign label. But we are going to talk about Wizkid and Davido and Burna Boy. Now, Wizkid and Davido never enjoyed what Burna Boy currently enjoys. Now, a lot of that is going to be down to the fact that they are foreigners to Burna Boy. We've discussed it several times on this show. The market at the time was not ready for what Burna Boy currently enjoys. They enjoyed a little bit of it, But the readiness of the market to what they were offering was a little bit, it was way off. That's why Wizkid, for example, changed. The record label is on RCA UK now. The sound is different, it's Afrobeat-esque. Whereas on sounds from the other side, it was more Caribbean, it was more dancehall-ish. Even when even in the mixing, even when it was Afrobeat, the mixing was electronic and they were mixing. They basically tried to take it out of Africa. You call this sound from the other side and you're taking it. It's not from the other side, it's basically from you to us. And then Davido basically he bought himself out of the first Sony deal he signed and came back to Africa, came back to Nigeria in 2017 and goes on a crazy run. Burna Boy on his own is different. It's different to all of them. Burna Boy is cut from a unique cloth. His palette is too expansive and his talent speaks volumes on him. Now, Burna Boy, the fact that Burna Boy can then go out and do these things is not surprising to anyone. Everybody kind of knew it was going to happen. Everybody didn't know it was going to happen. Don't let me say that. Everybody thought Burna Boy could achieve it. Now it's just proving everybody right that, okay, I can achieve it, and here I am, I'm doing it. But Wizkid and Davido could never produce an album like African Giant and Twice as Tall. They could never. That's the problem. That was the problem. That still is the problem. And that's why Burna Boy remains the number one in the conversation of Afrobeats to the world. That's why he's the poster boy now.
How much role did the branding play? Because he branded from the African Giants, the Africanism, continued also on Twice as Tall.
Yeah.
How much did that play into the whole thing?
Let's look at it critically from this perspective, right? The Recording Academy, for example, is a bunch of it's an independent body. They select members of that Recording Academy randomly. Now, a lot of them might be practitioners in the music industry, but it doesn't necessarily mean that a lot of them have an idea or necessarily have an idea of what African music is. To the average American, I'm not saying every American, you have American friends like Charlamagne the God, for example, who know what Africa is about. But to the average American, even on social media, they are shocked when they see pictures of Nigeria. So the African aesthetic to them is the tokenized idea of Africanism, right? These guys, when they see certain things, and before we get there, Fela is the focal point of what an African artist should be. Is like what they expect everybody to channel when they're looking at an artist. And the standard that Fela sets means that the average African artist who wants to break into that market must mean more than the music. So when he was going into that space, for example, he didn't necessarily have this branding. Like, what was Burna Boy's last body of work before he went into the space? What was Burna Boy's last body of work, last act as a Nigerian artist before he released Outside? Burna Boy's last act as a Nigerian artist was basically like any other pop artist. It was like everybody else. He wasn't doing anything special. It was always about this Fela story, but the Pan-African narrative never came alive until the middle of 2018, when he started going on radio tours, when he was appearing on The Breakfast Club, when he was appearing on a lot of things. And you have to give credit to Atlantic Records and his team and his mom and a lot of other people for bringing it full circle for him. You praise them a lot. But the thing, when everything really crystallized for Burna Boy was when that Coachella debacle happened. He came on social media. I still think the way everybody perceives that is very problematic. Burna Boy was not right in that conversation. However, he succeeded. They found a way to spin it in his favor. And what he said as part of his rant during that conversation, "I'm an African Giant," became the title of his album. Between then and now, Burna Boy has become sort of this phase for Africanism, for the African struggle. Everybody wants to crown him as the next fella, whatever that means. Everybody wants to crown him as, they want to put a responsibility on him. Oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. You have to make sure you mean more than the music. If you are saying it, you have to back it up. That was why a lot of people were dragging him during the NSAS protest. Because he keeps on producing these rhetorics. Now you have to back it up with actions. That's why a lot of people are applauding him for making that song about the Lekki Tollgate massacre. So you have to then look at how the branding for the Academy now, the idea ties into what the Academy wants, the standard they have for the African artist who is coming into their space. And now Burna Boy is making something like a wonderful record. That record is not good, it's not great, it's a terrible record. The idea is forced. The Africanism in that video is very forced. It's unnecessary avant-garde Africanism. You shouldn't do that. However, it was a calculated attempt to get a Grammy nomination. And the entire idea of Burna Boy's brand is working in his favor. He's mentioning Adebayo Ogunlesi on Wonderful. He's doing a lot of things. He's featuring the lead singer of Lady Smith, Black Mambazo. He's copying him. Even on the art for his album, he's behaving like he's Obatala and Orunmila. The shoes and everything coming down from heaven is the Yoruba idea of creation. That's what he's trying to portray in that artwork. So the entire branding and everything ties into what the Academy loves. But the most important thing is that the music is actually good. That's where the talent comes in.
So where does these nominations, the African Giant, Prize of Store, what does it do for Burna Boy's legacy as a Nigerian artist? Man,
the thing with Burna Boy is his entire story is very, it can be confusing when you want to quantify it. He's able to drag himself into the conversation with just 3 albums in 3 years, right? And the idea is, even when he wasn't succeeding, right, and he wasn't operating at the top form that a lot of his members, a lot of the people in his generation were operating at, he was still releasing bodies of work. Like between 2010 and 2016, when Wizkid and Davido went on their sojourn out of the country into the West, Burna Boy had over 4 bodies of work. Whereas Davido had 1 at the time. Wizkid had just 2. So by between 2018 and now, Burna Boy has been able to elevate himself in terms of conversations. And he's been able to achieve something that I would like to call the trifecta. And the trifecta is the conversation of 3 quality bodies of work, 3 critically acclaimed bodies of work consecutively, like back to back. The only person who can lay claim to that in his generation is Olamide. That's the only person. And across Nigerian history, the people that have been able to achieve that, they are not up to 7. Maybe 7 or 8. Let's look at it critically. 7. So when you look at these conversations and how Burna Boy has been able to drag himself to the conversation, I'm not going to say that Burna Boy has necessarily surpassed people like Davido, Wizkid, and Olamide, but it's looking pretty interesting right now. 2 Grammy nominations is a lot. It's a lot. So we are going to look at what comes next for Burna Boy. If another quality album comes next for Burna Boy and leads to another Grammy nomination, then we might want to call Burna Boy the greatest of his generation.
Okay. Does it stand a chance at the award, looking at everybody that is up against?
It's a dicey conversation. Like, it's a really dicey conversation. You have to look at the people that Burna Boy is up against. Last year, there's no Angelique Kidjo in this conversation. But over the years, the Nigerians that have gotten nominated in this category, like people who went out of Nigeria to create music in the West, Sunny Ade, Femi Kuti, Seun Kuti, they've lost those awards. Burna Boy lost the first one to Angelique Kidjo, another African, by the way. But this year, even though throughout all those years when Femi Kuti, Seun Kuti lost, even though you felt slighted slightly, you might have felt slighted by the outcome of the awards, but you are not necessarily going to argue against the winners. The same thing with Burna Boy last year. But this year, it's looking like Burna Boy might win. Like, his chances of winning, they're higher than last year. Ask me why. The Academy operates on this idea of familiarity. Before Angelique Kidjo won, she was nominated a couple of times, like a lot of times, about 4 times, before she finally won one. But when the Academy picks an interest in you, you become a favorite of theirs. That's where Burna Boy looks to be at right now. Okay. And this is not going to be his last Grammy nomination. It's not going to be his last, make no mistake. So the idea is, even if Burna Boy doesn't win now, he's still going to win that Grammy. Because that's how the Academy operates. There's a pattern to how they behave. But this year, the only person that can stop Burna Boy in this category is Anushka Shankar. And Anushka Shankar is the daughter of Ravi Shankar. Her sister is Norah Jones. Norah Jones is a Grammy winner, a multiple Grammy Award winner, right? So she has that legacy going for her. And this is going to be her 7th nomination. So her situation is even more down than Burna Boy. She has never won it. And the album is actually really good. Now, a lot of people are saying anti-Ballas or anti-Ballas might win it for Full Chronicles. But they are basically like a reimagination of Fela in New York. But the problem with anti-Ballas is anti-Ballas makes Afrobeat while being American. Burna Boy makes Afrobeat as a Nigerian. So I don't, if they are nominated in the same category, the Academy faces a lot of conversation around gentrification right now. So if they give it to anti-Ballas, it's going to be a problem. So they are not going to give it to anti-Ballas. If anybody is going to contend against Burna Boy in that category, it's Anushka Shankar.
So finally, what's your take on the change of the category from best world music album to best global music album?
It's actually a pretty interesting conversation. Like, I have a problem with how people have been able to just call out the Academy. Like Africans calling out the Grammys, calling out the Grammys, calling out the Grammys. I don't understand it. I can't process it. Like, it's the Grammys. Like, America is like the holy grail country for most of the people in the world. Except maybe you are from the Middle East, where there's a lot of wealth and where the government has created a pattern of wealth for you and your family. Because if you get an eminent domain in those places, you are going to get money because the government is going to pay you. But if you are from any other part of the world, you want to emigrate to America. Even if your father is a billionaire, your parents are probably going to send you there for education. So that's where we are as people. So America inspires the rest of the world. Culturally now, inspires the rest of the world. It's an aspiration for everybody. So everything that America owns, or everything America does culturally, is more likely to inspire the rest of the world and influence the way the world operates. So the idea of people then going at the Academy is something I don't understand. Even though I get the fact that the Grammys are very, very coveted, it's a coveted award. Musically, it's the most coveted music award in the world. But at the end of the day, a lot of people tend to forget that the Grammys are an American award. They are not African. It wasn't created for the world. It is an American award. But because everybody aspires to win a Grammy, they made it inclusive. It's no different from the MTV African Music Award creating a Best International Act category. It's not different from the BET creating a Best International Act category. It's not different from Mobo creating a Best African Act category. It's just inclusion. Why are they not going at the Latin Grammys for not having an African category? So the idea of saying the Grammys must do this is kind of is unfathomable to me. And there's also a hint of entitlement in it. And the greatest problem I have with it is, the people are saying the linguistic meaning of world means America is taking itself out of the world. So that means it's superior to the world. Now they're saying America now replaced it with global instead of world. That's semantics. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. They then switch the meaning of the category. But finally, it's still essentially the same award. There is no difference. So instead of you doing what you are doing and saying, that, just create an African award. Create an African award. So if you are going to say that the Grammys shouldn't do something for you, then you should be able to do something for yourself. Or do something for yourself. Create an African award. People don't even attend the Headies, for example. Nigerian superstars don't attend it. I get it. You have won it before. You have won it severally. But even people who have won the Grammys severally are still good. They attend the Grammys. Jay-Z didn't attend it for a couple of years in the early 2000s. Now it goes there every year. It was honored a couple of years ago at the Grammys, where he delivered at the post-Grammy party, where he delivered a speech. You might say that the Headies and a lot of Nigerian awards have not been exactly they don't have the best reputation. But at the end of the day, if you don't value your stuff, nobody's going to value it for you. The win here is to stop fighting the Grammys for inclusion. The win here is to create our own. That's the end goal. That's what we should be aspiring to. And that's facts only.